Hi and welcome. In this video I want to give you a full walkthrough of my track Beyond the Stars that I had the pleasure to write for the Two Steps from Hell album Chaos Theory. I will go from the basic structure to the final mastering, so I hope you enjoy over 1 hour of video material. And just in case you're up for more trailer music material, make sure to check out my free Audio Artist Academy or even check out my course Trailer Music Trailblazers. And as always, you will find the link in the video description below. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy this video. Okay, so let's dive into the structure of this track. So you can see that there is an intro part. Again, we have the main part here. Then we also have a little bit of an extended, quieter part. And then we have the dramatic ending or the final part. Also, you can see, before I forget this, I want to mention this, you see the gaps again here. Then also another one is happening here and here. So let's analyze what is going on here. Okay, to this point, this is just the intro. You can hear nothing special, a little bit of build-up, a little bit of tension creating by staying on the same bass note. You hear a little bit of a fragment of the main theme here. So these are these 3 notes that happen throughout basically the entire song, and this will lead into this more powerful part towards the ending. So next up is a little bit more building. And also you can now hear that the rhythm, the ba, 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 these hits are now a little bit stronger. So in the beginning, pay attention to that it was just a synth here. Okay, but it's always present, and this is what I think the most important thing when it comes to like the storytelling. You just stay in the same topic. You don't change too many melodies, you don't change chords, you don't change too many parts. You just build and create tension. And then at the end, of course, we have that little gap here. So this is the main part. There's also nothing really special happening. It's more of like a little bit focused towards the dialogue part again. Maybe there is some action happening. Maybe there's some dialogue, a little bit of storytelling of the movie trailer or of the movie itself. If the editor wants to have this part shorter, they can probably cut out the last half because it's basically the same. So I just wanted to do that without building too much, but just keeping it at the same level, because most of the time there at this part in a trailer, there's the storytelling. There is something getting into the characters or revealing some mystery or whatever at this point. Also notice that I continued the rhythm, this ba 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 ba, but I didn't play the melody because I felt it's distracting at this point and I don't want to overuse it in general. So again, after this part, we go into one of these gaps again here. And then you already heard it, we reintroduce the melody, and we have this for 8 bars actually going, depending on how you count. And then at the end, basically the part repeats, and then we have some build up that is bringing a little bit more tension towards the final part. And basically back into the final downer or the final gap where we build a little bit more tension again and then finally release the whole beast for that final part here. Okay, so for this part, it's basically twice the same part here with a little bit of variation of the, let's say, the main vocals and, you know, some little variation also in the chords and the arrangement. And then towards the end, we have directly going into like an ending of the track. But then again, as a reminder, we have the very initial fraction of the melody, the first 3 notes of the melody that also happen to at the very beginning. We also have this at the end again too, because I like to create this kind of like reminder, you know, this corporate identity. You know, identification, whatever you want to call it, that characteristic for that track, that people always get reminded, you know, of the beginning of the track. Maybe to create a subconscious circle, maybe they want to go home, check out the track, you know, get an album just in case if this would be something that would be publicly available, whatever reason. So I just like to build these things that also the ending is sometimes the beginning again. Okay, so that's it for the structure. Okay, harmony in theory, there is actually not a lot going on. This entire track stays on D minor until the very end, until up to like 2 minutes. And then let me just open the trombone chords because I used like closed chords here. It's basically B flat, C, then D minor, then going back to the C, then B flat again, then C, then D, and then going back to the C chord, to the final chord here. Okay, last but not least, we have our little melody here, which is basically just these 3 notes. That the track is starting with, and it's basically like the rudimentary notes of what is later becoming on that mighty French horn melody. Let me play you this one here. So this is the entire melody. Again, this is not a lot what is going on, but I can't press this enough. We're not writing music for other composers. We just want to build tension as much as possible and then go into a glorious final part where we just unleash the beast or make everything shine. And this also, you know, matches with the trailer. If you're watching a trailer, there is always the explosions and the mysterious stuff or the glorious stuff, the shiny stuff is always happening towards the end to build that endless amount of tension that makes you want to see that movie. So let's take a look at the strings here. I've used the Nucleus strings full ensemble spiccato patch. I think I've used that for the entire production of that album. Because the track stays in D all the time, there is just a little bit of, let me just play you the part here. This is basically it. We have a little bit of variation going on towards the end. So very, let's say, yeah, not really organic, just like robotic. I just wanted to have it that way, and also to just, you know, kind of like enforce the feeling for that rhythm that we're used, ba 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 ba, like the hits we use as also kind of like a signature thing. I also use the double basses and the cellos doubled here. So the structure is a little bit different, but there is this gap happening, and this is just the length roundabout of these initial hits, ba, 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 to just finish that phrase, and then there is a rest going on. So nothing really special, the same thing repeats, and then we only have strings again in the final part, so we have 2 patches here. Again, used Nucleus, full ensemble, the sustained patches here. I left the reverb on and everything. The only thing that I didn't need for this track, I set the sample start to 0, so I didn't need to take care about, you know, track delay or anything. So we just have simple triads playing here with that patch. So that's basically it. You just have some modulation going on to create dynamics a little bit. What is happening here next on this track here is the same staccato pattern. Basically the same thing, and then towards the end we have it also played an octave above, so that it sticks through the choir and all the other elements. Okay, that's it for the strings. Okay, so let's check out the brass here. So again, nothing really special here with that brass, but it serves its purpose. Just wanted to have like a decent, you know, thick pad. Again, I'm not, when it comes to hybrid music, I'm not thinking orchestra, I'm just thinking instrument colors. So I was thinking like the typical trombones pad. What I also want to mention is, again, what I'm basically did all the time is to layer, put these on the same MIDI channel and use the sustains, the marcatos, and the staccatissimos. It could vary. Sometimes you use the staccatos, sometimes you use the marcato longs, sometimes you just use marcatos and sustains, sometimes you just use the staccatissimos and the sustains. It totally depends on what you want to bring across, what this song is about, what this track is about. It's pretty convenient to work with because you are always able to play short notes. And you can play sustain notes and do swells. So that's why I really love doing this. And I just love using the Junkie XL brass because the dynamic range is so huge. It's not just sounding great when it's loud, it also sounds great when it's very low. It's the best pick for me when it comes to this kind of hybrid music. Also, I felt that the trombones weren't enough. I just wanted to have something this is a little bit more nasty. So I just loaded the chimbasy here. And I did the same, basically, just the marcato shorts, staccatissimos, and the sustains. And these sound like this. So just providing kind of like a synth. I was thinking in that color of, creating something that is really huge. I don't care if it's a synth or chimbasys or trombones. I was just picking something that I was hearing in my head. So it sounds like this when we both combine these. Okay, and for the horns, I used Junkie XL, the 12 horns, and again, the same setup, sustains, marcato short. So this sounds like this here. Towards the end of the phrases, I have a little bit of dips going on in dynamics, but the track is so busy at the end, I just really wanted to cut it through. So I'm playing you all the tracks of the end. There are so many, drums, the synth going on, the trombones, the chimbasy. It's kind of like you can hear everything at the same time, but nothing really just fights with each other to stick through. Okay, that's it for the brass. So let's talk about the percussions of this track. I just want to separate it between the cinematic percussions, that is this part here, and later on we talk about all the electronic, the synth-based stuff and the hits and the effects and everything. In the beginning, you have this little thing going on here. Nothing too special, it simply supports the hits that we talk about later and so supporting this part, we basically have the Los Angeles modern percussion, the bass drum ensemble going on. This ensemble sounds like this. So it's kind of like a roomy, low tomish, but it's called bass drum, so it's bass drums obviously, but it sounds like a low tom ensemble, and I mixed that up with the Medusa main kit, which sounds like this. So it's also low toms, but there is a lot of aggressive attack. Let me just play another round. Okay, and when we both mix them, it sounds like this. So it sounds like a combination of bigger tom ensemble, but there is a lot of attack, like a modern sound, but also like a traditional roomish character, but from two different libraries. This is why I love layering so much. So you don't use the same room information from the same drum library or the same strings library or whatever. You just mix it all up. This is the next part here. So this is the groove basically happening. What we have here is the same part going on from these, from from Los Angeles Modern Percussion. We have the Medusa main kit playing a little bit of a different part now. So it mixes up the tom ensemble a little bit with a typical bass and snare drum. And then we have the ensemble drums from Heaviosity, and they sound like this. Pretty hardcore. We also have decimator drums here. I know this library is not available anymore, but you can find these sounds or similar sounds in Cerberus. And all together, let me just activate them one by one. So I didn't play, I'm sorry, decimator drums on its own. So pretty thick. Then again, and this is just what you shouldn't do in general, but you can of course do it, copy just a part over when there is so much other stuff happening. I mean, for this track, in the first half here, we don't have any major harmonic stuff going on. It just stays in the key of D, you know, building tension, stays like this all the time. And then later on we have all the vocals and all the other synth and the entire brass section that wasn't there before, as you have noticed. This is basically what happens for the percussion. Also, one thing I want to mention is what I really love doing, what brings a lot of power to drums, is when you just take a look at these ensemble drums again here, you can see that I've simply layered several drums. So we use this one, we use this one, and we also use this drum. Okay, so all together they sound like this. For trailer music, I always like to stay a little bit on point and tight, but I could technically go in here, whatever software you're using, and we could say like rough quantize, and I could bring in a value like 8 or something. And when I hit quantize, you can hopefully see that in the video that I'm just, you know, randomize these notes. So if we just play them right now, let me just first go back to when there was no quantization happening, play it again to you. And let's undo it. And as you can see, I also don't include like the first notes, because if I just pick those two, I would mess up the parts, you know, and make this disappear. I just randomized these notes here. It sounds a little bit like this. Again, let's take this out again, listen to it again. So the difference is not really that much. Maybe I can use something like 15 and make it a little bit more obvious. So the drums now sound a little bit more like strummed, you know, like several players just hitting kind of like with different delay settings, micro timing. So somebody's rushing, somebody's a little bit laid back. And this is creating way more massive drum ensemble than you actually have right here. So if you use just hitting several keys at once and just do this quantization trick, you can make drums way more massive, but you also have to be aware they sound not that tight anymore and could get a little bit washy inside the full mix. Okay, so that's it for the percussions. So let's check out the synth here. So the first thing that I've used, I put it into the synth section because I didn't want to create dedicated bus for just one instrument. I used this Nada Dream piano here. It sounds very cool. I just wanted to start off with something dreamy, but I already wanted to introduce that hook line that is later taken over by the horns and the choirs and all that stuff, to introduce that in the beginning already. We just layer that with this Devastator plugs that I've been using here. And let me just play you the sound here. Okay, so if you put these both together, it sounds like this. So, I mean, this is my sophisticated way of not making some instrument obvious, but just layering it. It later on happens also with these plugs here. Let's go through that right now here, because there is this plug also by Devastator that sounds like this. And this is basically the strings melody here, this little ostinato or arpeggio. And it adds a little subtle thing on top of the strings to sound a little bit different. So this is, again, by way of being a little bit sophisticated, what we are all longing for. We just want to make that track special. And if I can't do that with the harmony and the theory or the chords and the melody to getting too sophisticated, because it doesn't make sense in trailer music and licensed music, you're writing music for the masses again, not for other composers. But to just, let's say, please that little urge to do something special, I am doing this with layering sounds, that it kind of like creates a unique character. Okay, so I don't want to cause too much chaos here. We have another patch here that is a massive X patch. It sounds like this. So it's kind of like a little attackish sound. And then together with Razor, another native instrument synth, it's one of my favorite patches, Rip It Up. It sounds like a distorted synth, distorted guitar, but it reminds me of trombones, like an electronic synth variant of trombones. And I like to use this, also sometimes layering this with trombones, very subtle, because it can create a really kind of like a battle sci-fi-ish, but orchestral sound still. But sometimes I just like to use it on itself and layer it with some other synth here, so to create this little with these sounds. Also next here we have a Hive arpeggio. I think I adjusted some of the notes. It also may be a preset. I have no problem using like little presets here and there if it's just buried inside the track. So okay, and I just mainly use these things to create pulls for the more important instruments. Then we have a repro patch here, sub-kiss bass. It sounds like this. There is tons of reverb on it. So it just gives you that this mixture of all these instruments. What we have here is, I just have to look because I rendered something from Zebra. Let me just unmute this here for a second. Play you this patch. So this is how it sounds like. And there is also no processing going on right now. I rendered this to audio. Now it sounds like this. I will show that later. A bit crusher and decapitator on it to just kind of mess it up a little bit. And when you listen to this section so far, it sounds like this. So basically the sound stops when the next hit is coming in. If you listen to that, it sounds very dry. Actually, you would probably put reverb on it, but it's not needed. So you have a direct signal sound in there and kind of makes sense. The other thing we have here is, I'm getting to these instruments later. So we have another pad of Devastator. Just a little bit of something that is creating atmosphere in the background. Next up we have these pulses. It's the low sub pulses by Devastator again, and it sounds like this. And we also have this little plug sound that I already talked about before. Let me just play you the full package here. Next up we have Artifact Reanimate by Audio Imperia, and they sound like this. So these are basically like some calling. It sounds a little bit like a mammoth or like a big robot or something, giving that hybrid feeling, but also another signature sound, because when you listen to that full part here, so what you basically have here, if you just reduce it to the core, it's basically ba 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 ba, wow, ting, ba 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 ba, It kind of creates a pattern. Later on in the track, you can see that I used pretty much the same patches as before, but in the end, something happens. You can see that I leave out a lot of synth at the end, but introduce some other synth here in the very back. I think I used Enna for this, not Enna. And it sounds like this. It sounds so huge. Getting loud again for a second here. Basically nothing really has space anymore, so that's why I got rid of these sounds and introduced something new. Next up we have a Nexus patch in here, and this is called Epic Dawn Split. Whatever you use, whatever you want to use, it's just something that fit to this part, and it sounds like this. I mean, this is basically like a brass, maybe with some strings in it, very, very softly, but it just basically matches the trombone chords above here. Also, there's a little bit of rub going on. Let me just play this to you with a full brass. So if I just mute that patch, it basically gives much more power to the entire orchestra. And this is the interesting part. It's just the orchestra is playing and it's basically filling up everything. But then you have a patch on top that kind of like gives way more juiciness, so to say. It fills and packs the track even more. We just have another synth here that is doing the same for the French horns. It's this lead sound of Devastator. It sounds really terrible if you listen to this, but it gives that track in combination with the horns. Let me just play that again for you. So again, I don't care if this horn sounds hybrid, sounds like a synth, because all I'm looking for is to getting like that big power and to create something unique. Let me just play you the full thing here. Now let me mute the horn. So you still have that power from that synth. Let me mute the synth now. So you hear the horns and the choir, but something is missing, and to just give those horns some teeth, be able to survive in that big battle where all that stuff is going on, I just, put that little synth on top on it. Yeah, and I think this gives that track that unique character, or what I'm preaching like every minute of my life, how much sense it makes to just layer all kinds of elements in sound and not think always in categories. These are synth, then I can do just this. This is my orchestra. I can only do this, I have trombones, there are just 4 trombones. So if you want to use 12, 36, 128 trombones, if it makes sense for a track, of course, it's kind of like dangerous if you use too many instruments, you get kind of like a swampy, muddy sound. But I mean, as long as it makes sense, to hit like a D minor chord with a 12 trombone patch and you hear 36 trombones, there is nothing wrong with it as long as it gives the track the deserved power. And of course, it's always not about power and being epic and blah, blah, blah. Most important is emotional and to just touch the listener. But this is a great way to just give all your tracks a unique character. Okay, so that's it for the synth. We just have one choir part in here, and this just takes the function of just thickening up the very ending. So let's listen to that part again here. It's getting a little bit louder again. Okay, so this is the choir that I used. So you can see it's very thick, just basically is a mixture of the horn melody, the brass, that little synth patch just to thicken up this entire thing. Yeah, that's it for the choirs. There is nothing really special to it, and in this case I have seen it again as some kind of like a layering color for the very end. Okay, so let's talk about the next category here, the hits. I am using for the gaps mostly, I'm using Gravity by Heaviosity, still an absolutely awesome library, totally underrated. There are some really great sub hits on there. So I'm using these for the, you know, the typical downers here. For these gaps, there is just something happening. You know, if the cutter doesn't want it, he can easily get rid of this, mute that part, no problem. Then next up, there is a patch that sounds really awesome. It's called Ultratron, and it's from the Hollywood Synth edition of Nexus, and it sounds like this. Like basically a drum hit. Not really drums, more hits. That's why it's obviously in this section here. And I just used that to support the synth section from above a little bit better. And next up we have a Devastator trailer drums. They're probably in every track of that album because they sound so thick and so huge. So if you hear that together with the Ultratron, it's just mighty. Next up we have a little thing going on here on that, and I just have to be honest here, I'm not really sure what this is. This is Epic Trailer Hits, Evolution, also Keep Forest Library. It sounds like this. So what happens here is that I created kind of like a signature pattern for this track with just that one instrument. That's it basically for the hits. If I just play you the entire hit section here, then you can make sense of that pattern. Okay, and so on. And if you just listen to the whole thing here, so this gives the track that driving character because of these things that are just sneaking in, like, you know, that are coming in like this. It gives the track a lot of power and speed and, you know, pulse basically. And it just helps a lot of building tension in the atmosphere. Okay, so it's SFX time, sound effects time. So we just have a few patches in here that is not technically a scream. It sounds like this. And I just cut this part for just one bar, and I created this from a sound, basically a simple process from Audio Imperia's Artifact Reanimate, which I really consider to be a great library, especially when it comes to all these signature sounds, these individual sounding elements that you can find in a hybrid trailer track. And it sounds like this. So that was a little bit too aggressive for me. So I just put reverb on top to kind of like make it longer, and then cut this track down. That's how it sounds. That's all. So when you listen together with this element here, which is again a little soft Braam by Devastator. Okay, and if you just listen to the sound effects section here, it just gives you kind of like a little bit of a, let me just turn on the click. Okay, so it creates kind of like an additional atmosphere that supports, you know, the entire idea of the track. So let me just play you the full parts, getting loud again. Just creating a little bit of a subtle thing on top. Next up here, we have a little bit of a funny thing. I honestly didn't know exactly what I wanted to try to do with it. So we have a little bit of a soft Braam sound here, but it just gets cut off because I just wanted to turn down everything that belongs to the synth section. So we just have a little bit of that kickish sound here. And if we just listen to that full part, it adds a little to the sub bass. So next up I have this little thing here that is from one of my libraries. It's Rising from the Surface. It's a little patch. Look, this looks really cool, right? What I did with that is I've used this element here from that library, which is basically a riser. And then I also have Evolution Dragon. I've used the downer. Okay, and if we combine, that's it for the SFX section here. But if we combine these two sounds, and again I'm playing you this with click. So it sounds kind of stupid when you listen to this on your own, but if you just listen to the full track, it sounds like this. So it's almost an element that you really can't hear, but it's there because there's something rising and bringing you down again, and it just always plays with your mind all the time below all the instruments. And last but not least, we just have this little sound here thing, and I've used Devastator again from the riser short section to just give a little bit of... very subtle, but just coming in at the very end of that part. Yeah, that's basically the same what's happening here, ramping up into the track again here at this part. Okay, so let me just play you again this one part here. Okay, so that's it for the SFX section here. I was really flattered because when the album was released, people assumed that Nick Phoenix was singing on this track, but it's all me. And I not particularly did it because I was singing to put myself on the spotlight here. I just wanted to pick vocals in general because it doesn't matter if you hire a male, female singer, it always adds something that is a little bit special. And you heard these vocals by now when listening to the full track, so I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight on how I did these. Let me just play you the final part again so you have it in your mind. Okay, so as you can hear, or hopefully as you can hear, you have this easy melody. And then you have like a little bit of a counter melody. But there is also a pattern going on in that counter melody. So let's listen to the vocals isolated. There's obviously lots of reverb on it. And then this is the next one here. A little glitch happening because of the tuning, because I show you right now. So besides that, there is no editing going on when it comes to like copying or stretching the file or anything. I just did a little bit of correction. If I just switch it to Vari Audio, you can see that there's quantized pitch and some straighten curve going on, not full like 100%, but always a little bit, not really subtle, but still somewhere around 50%, so that it just does a little bit of something, or leaving a little bit of character, of the natural character from my voice, and not just messing it up and you know, creating kind of like a chair effect. Of course, there's a little glitch going on. I could have fixed that, but you don't hear that in the full track. If I just play it from here, it just sounds like a little bit like a pull-up or something. You can see that I did a little bit of timing correction, but put it a little bit in the flow of the track. So let's get into the mixing. So now you can see that I have my buses here. Basically every of these tracks are going in here. Most important thing is that you never go too high. You can see that all of my faders here, let me just zoom in again here for a little bit so you can see that they are mostly placed around -18 until -12. Some of course go a little bit more up. It's absolutely not a problem, but the main balance should be around this area on average, like -12 dB something. Later on, you don't get a problem that everything is pumping up and you get clipping signals or anything. So this is just very important to keep in mind. And then you just route all of these things into group stems. I also suggest to use insert effects unless you're really fond of what you do with send and returns. I like to have it the easy way to just have reverbs and everything on the stems itself so that I can later on simply export stuff. And if a customer says we don't want reverb, I can just go on here and just bypass these. Or if they say we just want the unprocessed stems, that you can just export them right away. So again, all of these things here have been routed to the group tracks over here, and then obviously everything is going into the master bus, and we have this mastering going on. Let's just hop over and take care of the plugins and the processing that I did for these tracks. So you can see on the strings there is nothing going on. There is the first thing happening here on this track. Let me just hop over here. So these are the Junkie XL Chimbasy, and what I did, let me just open, I'm sorry, I just have to jump back and forth. Let's listen to this and what we did here. This is how it sounds without. Be reminded that I have the mastering signal activated all the time. This would be too much of a hassle to just turn this off because it would totally change the sound. So I just want to have, let's say, the final sound, how it's been released, how you can hear the final outcome, but without the internal processing that is going on specifically on that instrument track. So this is how it sounds without. So there is a lot of buzz going on here, and what I wanted to do is simply just get rid of that buzzy sound that the Chimbasys create. So it sounds like this. Okay, so just getting rid of that buzzy sound. I'm just cleaning up my mix again to just leave space for the synth, the high strings. So basically everything that is high frequencies. The Chimbasy currently would steal away too much of that sound that I want to reserve for other instruments. This is the most important thing always for me. So now we have that nada piano here. So I just used a little bit of FabFilter Timeless on this. Let's play this piano without. And let's turn this on. So this is just there to create a little bit of a more dreamlike atmosphere, mysterious something. I remember on the last record I did for Two Steps from Hell, Solaris, I've used a lot of delay effects on the strings. On almost every track I used delay effects on the staccato strings, and I loved it so much, and it kind of like created a unique character. When you listen to that album and you listen to the strings most of the time, they are not really like always hardcore staccato, spiccato strings on point, but they are sometimes just like moving and playing along a little bit in the stereo field. I just love doing this. It was like a little bit of a special, like that characteristic sound that I wanted to put to that album. So the next sound we have here is this Hive synth. So the same basically here. I just wanted to clean up that mix. I was totally fine with the bass elements, the mid-range and everything. Let me play this without. So there's a lot of sizzling. And I didn't want to have this. This is basically everything what I did here. So we hop over to the next one. There is a little bit of stuff going on. So let me just open what I did here. We have the decimator, we have driver. Okay, so we can have kind of like a nice overview. So let's find this instrument. Let me just deactivate everything. So this is the order, this one, then to the driver, then timeless, and then reverb. It sounds like this without anything. This is the signal. Okay, not really like special. So then I turned on the decapitator. It's actually a lot of distortion going on here. See how this sound changes. It's just like a sub-synth with a lot of attack, and with the distortion we get this nice signal. Then I turned on driver and it sounds like this. Can you hear that little artifact at the very ending? It's kind of like a little bit similar to what Mick Gordon did on the Doom soundtrack. He's working with low sub synth and with kind of like weird releases. So we can take a look at this patch again. I think that was that repro sub kiss bass. This is kind of like a sub synth only. You heard this sound before without. And now you can hear that the driver adds this kind of like weird feedback release on the end. Okay, so now we turn on FabFilter Timeless to just give it a little bit more space. This is the sound, and now I just wanted or felt like routing this all through a little bit of reverb here. Maybe I just play the full track again so you can now hear what's going on. So you hear that little release at the end. It's just adding a little bit of something that is not really audible when you just listen to the track and you don't know it, but you would definitely miss it when it's not there. And it also melts together and merges with that nada piano in a sense. So we have a little bit of bit crusher and decimator for that little signal sound here. So this is how it sounds without anything. Okay, not really like doing something special. So we add the bit crusher. I'm kind of like destroying the signal a little bit more, and then I'm putting some decapitator. So it just sounds like a broken signal, like a very abrupt or short frequency signal from a radio transmission or anything. So let's listen to how this sounds in context. And the thing is, it stops exactly where the big hit is coming in. So the next instrument here, we have this Sonic reverb. I really love this reverb because it has kind of like a special character. Can I do this with Valhalla Shimmer? Can I do this with Seventh Heaven? Probably in a way, kind of like, yes, recreate this. But again, for me, it is always choice. I just like to open things and see if it works. If it doesn't work, I close them again. If I think I just want to try something else, I open this again and try it. When it works, I use it. So there is nothing that I think I always have to use this plugin. I always have to use this plugin. It's the same for me when I'm cooking. When I'm cooking, I think, would it be cool to put some curry in here or soy sauce or whatever, or salt and pepper or, you know, whatever. I just try it. And if it tastes good, I prepare that meal a little bit more often in the future. If I don't like it, I do it once and then quickly forget about this. Again, so we have this, I just play that without, it sounds like this. So it's this little call, there's nothing special to it, so we put that Sonic reverb on top and it sounds like this. Let's listen to this, how it sounds in context. So it's just adding, again, just a tad in the background. If you listen to this without... I simply love to play around with elements that you can't really hear, but they add something to the track. Okay, next up we have this one here. So this is like the synth. Yeah. That is supporting the horns. But because of the big reverb, and then in combination with the horns again. Okay, it's getting loud here. This is the final part of the music. I think I've shown that before when we talked about the synth section, but let's do that once again. So it just adds that little subtle signal that is putting like a sawing character to the French horns. So we have some Valhalla Shimmer here. So you can see that there is not really too much processing going on all these tracks. This is like another pluck sound. And I just put There is something awesome about this Valhalla shimmer. It's like an emulation of the Big Sky, a guitar pedal, that blue big one. Can't quite recreate the sounds that you can do on the Big Sky, but the Valhalla shimmer comes really close. And if you just want to particularly go for that little pitch above, you know, like that little octave above or these 2 octaves above, it can do some really cool stuff for your music. So again, most important for this track here, having direct crunchy sounds sitting there and just with no reverb, lots of distortion, and then you have all these dreamy elements that come in. Here, let's check out, there's a little bit of reverb going on this track. I just have the trailer drums here. So let's turn off the reverb. And turn it on. Just a little bit of reverb on top for these. We have one more here at the back. It's just like that little virtual mix rack on the vocals. So I think we talked about this one before. This is how it sounds without everything. So diving into the bass section over here. So let's start off with the strings here. And let me just play the final part of the track, so we can hear what's going on. I've used these effects. So this is the order. We have a little bit of EQ going, then we have this rack, and then we have Seventh Heaven at the end. You can also see that I have the Sonsig reverb on here and the RC48 by Native Instruments. I just kind of like fooled around with all kinds of reverb settings, and it turned out that I just liked Seventh Heaven the most. So let me just deactivate all these effects here and let's listen to how it sounds. So I'm taking that little dip out here, 500 Hertz. I just want to create this space kind of like for the horns, dipping out a little bit of 500 because I want to create this range for the horns to, you know, make them stick a little bit through, and this noble kind of frequency. I may be totally wrong by using the wrong words here, but this is my impression. This is how I like to see these things, and they work. And also I just tried to dip down a little bit of the 5K section to just create a little bit of space for the upper vocal range, for the choirs, for the, you know, like all the synth and everything. Okay, so the order would be that you may have heard somewhere, you know, but why do you use the EQ before the compression? Shouldn't you do compression first and then use the EQ, and then you hear something else and then you hear something else again, and then you're as confused and don't even know what to do, and it just totally stops your creative process. The simple answer is whatever feels right. In this case, I simply wanted to get rid of these frequencies to create space for the other instruments. So I just added this channel simulation here, emulation, sorry. So just creating a little bit of that analogish feeling, and then putting some compression on top to just glue it all together. And then we have some custom series EQ here, the Slate one. I just adding a little bit of 15K. I just fooled around and thought, okay, getting rid a little bit more of the 4K. Sometimes it's like a process. You just add stuff, then you take stuff away. It's like a little bit like sculpting. At some point I'm using different tools, but at the same time. But then at some point it sounds good. It could be that, like, really, if you're a skilled audio engineer saying like, oh my God, what are you doing here? You're adding frequencies, then you take them away. The thing is, I don't care. It works, you know, and there is nothing wrong with it. It doesn't add any fragments or something that is disturbing the track itself. So let's activate this one here. So I'm not doing that much, just adding a touch of 1.5 dB on 15K, just adding a little bit of something. And then last but not least, we have some air EQ going on here. It's set to 11.8. And we have a high cut going on after this. I can bypass this right now and activate it and fool around with these two so you can hear the difference. Could I have used this one only? Yes, maybe. Could I have used only this one? Yes. but it worked, okay? So I'm not thinking that much, how can I make something work better if it just works? And it's not like I'm spending hours of fooling around with these things. So last but not least, we have reverb, we have the Sanders Hall. I just used this Sanders Hall for the entire album. I think it just sounded great. Maybe on the next album I will use something else. I don't think about this. I just see what is coming along when I'm doing the next album and what will I use there. Maybe there will be like a new reverb, sounds absolutely groundbreaking. Maybe I will use one that I have been owning for like 5 or 10 years. I totally don't know. I will decide when this opportunity is coming up. So this is how it sounds without reverb. Okay, turning this off again. So it's already got a nice room, but... And again, if we just listen to this entire thing in context, this is to me what matters. Do the strings sound great in the track? So let me just play the full track. It's getting loud again. The end is pretty busy anyway, but the strings are still there. Let me just play that bit here. Okay, head over to the brass section here. So again, we have a little bit of a dip down here. It was probably a little bit too much of the noble character. And we're just playing in combination with the chimbasy, the trombones, and the horns. So let's bypass these. This is the last one in line. This was the first one, second one, third one. So let's listen to how the brass sounds. So it's not really audible, but let's listen to how this, when we hear that in full context, it's just a little dip happening here. I felt that this is what I had to do to, maybe it was a little bit too much. There is absolutely no problem just testing things out during the process. So let's turn on the virtual channel. Giving it a tiny little bit of that analog character. Then next up we have the compression. Just gluing it all a little bit together, and then I just opened this here and added again a little bit of 500 hertz again. Let's see how this sounds. So let's turn on the reverb here. And then let's deactivate it. So pretty studio-like, a decent orchestral room, but I just wanted to have it big here on this point. I'm just bypassing this EQ and this EQ to just find out if it does something. I just have to say it adds something, so there is nothing wrong with just playing around, and if you're convinced it does something and it sounds better, in this case I don't care if it was more of like a homeopathic doses or something. If it makes you happy, if it works, then do it. We just go over to the percussions here. So we have two things again going on, a little bit of a dip in a few frequencies here. Let's bypass these and listen to this group track. So getting rid, as I said before, 200 hertz is mostly for me the point where percussions stack up in some tonality, if that makes sense. So let me just fool around with this here. tonal character of the percussion ensemble is gone. And this is what I wanted to have to just create space for the synth and all the busy instruments around this area. Okay, and then we have a little bit of a dip down of the low frequencies, so to not adding them up around this range here. So first we have virtual channel, then we have the compression, and then a little bit of EQ going on. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Just glues things together, give it a little bit more impact, and that it's a little bit sounding more sharp to survive in this busy part of the track. Okay, next up would be the synth. We have some hardcore dip down here happening. I just wanted to get rid of everything below 50 Hertz because there is a lot of power coming from the chimbasy. Let's listen to how this sounds. So we have the rich bass of these is still here. I just don't want to have stuff going on below 40 Hertz. Let's just play the full section here again. Let's mute the chimbasy here. We have the choirs, same process, virtual channel, a little bit of FG4-1 for compression, the air EQ adding some extreme high frequencies, and then adding a lot of reverb. So let's listen to how these sound. So especially this portion of air is very important to me here. So let's play the ending. So this is the only thing that is going on the hits here. We just have, again, the same setup, just adding a little bit of virtual channel compression and equalizer. So I just wanted to play the full track and just bypass this. Wanted to have them really sticking through, and again, see, like mixing, like you know, tweaking a bike, a motorcycle, a car or something. You just do something that maybe just adds 0.5%. Maybe there is another process that adds 2%. Maybe there is 3 or 4 processes that add 0.1% and so on. But in the end, you are optimizing the speed of the car or the power of the car for like 10, 20, 30%. You want to make sure that all these little tweaks improve the entire track to a certain amount of percent. Okay, so let's check out the SFX section here without. Okay, so you can hear that there is too much bass on that low thing happening here. So basically another way of just cleaning up that buzz here. So that's it for the mixing. Let's head over to the mastering process. I will just turn off all the plugins that we have open here. And this is the order. First, I start with the dynamic spectrum mapper to the drummer, then we go into the Neutron, then we have a little bit of OTT, then we go to the invisible limiter, and then we go to the Oxford Inflator. So let me just play without anything. Okay, what I wanted to have first is just basically glue all kinds of things together. Why did I use this one? I find it works pretty well. It sounds like this. Let's turn this on here. Glues stuff together a little bit more. So next up we have another compressor on top. I just like it to have like several compressors doing their thing. I think there might be a little dropout of the audio when I activate it. With the drummer, there's a little bit of more going on under the hood. It's not just a compressor. You can just set it to neutral, clarity, 1, 2, more air, do rumble, punch, wide mix and anything. Most of the time I'm using the neutral setting here. When I just move that knob here, it just adds a little bit of higher frequencies. Just sounds a little bit clearer, a little bit more shiny. Okay, so now we hop over and turn on Neutron. So again, this is how it sounds without. And this is how it sounds with Neutron. So you can hear it also sounds a little bit softer in general. The general picture seems a little bit more balanced. Right, so let's go through the individual settings, what is going on here. As said before, I'm not ashamed to use Neutron. It just helps me to see what is going on. I can check out this EQ curve. Let's just bypass this one. So I have to learn, you know, something like that. I have to get rid something like 1K. Maybe it was a little bit more. I'd reduced it. Maybe in general, it was still a little bit too much. Then it raised a little bit here. And of course, I tweaked these a little bit. Maybe it was less extreme, more extreme. Maybe I felt like changing a few things. I also don't like to always set these things to like 100% mix, especially for the sculptor. I just like to put it to something like 50. EQ, I use the mix level a lot. Compression is okay here, compression too. Most of the time, I don't like the exciter. If I like it, I just dial it in like a, you know, like 25% something. So these are the settings that I've used here. So we added OTT. This is how it sounds without. So this is adding, you know, some additional light. We have some high frequencies of the highs. We just added a little bit. We got rid of the mid frequencies a little bit, and we also added some low frequencies again. Next up, we have our limiter. I just want to bring this thing to level. I just added something like 1.45 dB. I have it set to minus 0.1. There is always a discussion. Do it like minus 0.2 or 0.3. I'm fine with this. It works. If something else works for you, that's totally cool. Let's turn this on and see how this sounds. Of course, on the heavy percussion, it just kind of chops off a lot of peaks, going down to like 4 dB something. Let me just click this again so we can see if it's really like 10 dB going on here. It's a little bit less, but I just felt this is okay in the invisible limiter. So last but not least, we have Oxford Inflator in here. I'm just using it probably on everything I do. It just adds something that sounds really amazing. Let's just see what this does. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, as with every other video too, make sure to use the comment section below and I will get back to you. That's it for this track. I hope you enjoyed this entire walkthrough and see you on the next video.